The crystalline spires of the starship Eternal Radiance gleamed under the light of a distant blue sun. Inside its polished corridors, everything sparkled with perfection. The Luxari crew members moved like living glass sculptures, their transparent bodies refracting light in beautiful patterns. The Veilborn floated gracefully, their ethereal forms barely touching the ground. Even the Symphytes hummed melodious tones as they worked, their slender fingers dancing across control panels. And then there was Crater. He stood in the corner of the engine room, his massive frame hunched over a toolkit. Brown fur covered his body, matted and rough. His claws scraped against the metal floor when he walked. His broad shoulders barely fit through standard doorways. To the elegant species of the Galactic Concordat, he was an eyesore. A mistake. An experiment in diversity that everyone regretted. Crater had arrived 6 months ago from a remote planet the Concordat had only recently discovered. His people, the Urskai, lived simple lives among forests and mountains. When the recruitment ship had landed, they had been promised that joining the galactic community meant equality and opportunity. Crater had volunteered, eager to learn about the stars his ancestors had only dreamed of reaching. The reality was different. "Move aside, beast," a Luxari engineer named Christo said, pushing past Crater without looking at him. "You are blocking the pathway with your bulk." Crater stepped back silently. He had learned not to respond. Words only made things worse. Every day was the same. He was assigned the dirtiest jobs on the ship. Cleaning waste recyclers. Scrubbing coolant spills. Hauling heavy equipment that the other species found too difficult to move. Never mind that he had studied engineering on his homeworld. Never mind that he understood quantum mechanics and fusion systems. To them he was just muscle. Ugly, primitive muscle. During meals the cafeteria would grow quiet when he entered. Other crew members would move to different tables. Once he had tried to sit with a group of junior officers. They had scattered like frightened birds, leaving their food behind. The next day someone had filed a complaint about his threatening presence. Captain Silvara, a Symphyte with silver skin that sang softly when she moved, had called him to her office that afternoon. "Crater, you must understand your position here," she had said, not meeting his eyes. "You were brought aboard as a goodwill gesture. The Concordat wanted to show we embrace all species. But you must not make others uncomfortable. Stay in your designated areas. Do your assigned work. Do not attempt to socialize." "Yes, Captain," Crater had rumbled, his deep voice making her flinch. But today was different. Today the main fusion regulator was failing. Crater could hear it from 3 decks away, a grinding whine that the others seemed oblivious to. The Urskai had evolved as hunters, their senses sharp and precise. He knew that sound meant danger. He found Christos and 2 other engineers standing around the regulator panel, their faces showing worry. "The oscillation frequency is destabilizing," one was saying. "If it reaches critical variance, we will lose primary power." "Redirect through the secondary manifold," Christos suggested. "Already tried. It is not responding." Crater watched for a moment, then stepped forward. "The harmonic buffer needs realignment. The magnetic containment field is 0.3 degrees off axis." The engineers turned to stare at him. "What would you know about it?" Christos sneered. "Go back to your waste bins, janitor." Crater said nothing more. He turned and walked away. Behind him the whining grew louder. 2 hours later the power failed. Emergency lights flickered on throughout the ship. Alarms blared. The engines went silent. In the darkness, Crater made his way to the engine room. The engineers were gone, probably reporting to the bridge. He opened his toolkit and began to work. His thick fingers moved with surprising precision. He had learned engineering by necessity on his homeworld, where every tool had to be crafted by hand, where understanding meant survival. It took him 30 minutes to fix what the superior engineers could not. When the lights came back on, no one thanked him. No one asked how it was done. The captain simply announced that the engineering team had resolved the crisis. Crater returned to his quarters. He looked at the picture of his homeworld on his small screen. The forest, the mountains, his family. He was alone among the stars, surrounded by those who saw him as nothing but ugly. He did not know that everything was about to change. The eternal radiance glided through space toward the void reaches, a region where stars grew dim and few ships dared to travel. The mission was simple: escort a delegation of Concordat ambassadors through dangerous territory to sign a peace treaty with a distant federation. For the crew it meant prestige and medals. For Crater it meant more work in the shadows. The ship's grand ballroom had been transformed into a glittering palace. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting rainbow light across marble floors. The elegant species wore their finest garments, shimmering fabrics that seemed to be woven from starlight itself. Diplomats and officers mingled, their laughter like music. Crater had been ordered to serve drinks. He moved between the tables, his large frame careful not to bump into anyone. The serving tray looked tiny in his massive paws. Guests pulled away when he approached, wrinkling their noses. One Veilborn whispered loudly enough for him to hear, "Must they allow that thing in here? It ruins the atmosphere." Captain Silvara stood at the center of the room, giving a speech about unity and cooperation among all species. Her words rang hollow in Crater's ears. He had heard such speeches before. They meant nothing. Then the captain noticed him. Her eyes narrowed. "Ah, and here we have a perfect example," she announced, her voice carrying across the silent room. "Our Erskine crew member Crater. A reminder that the Concordat extends its hand even to the most unfortunate of species." Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. "Tell me, Crater," the captain continued, walking closer. "Do you enjoy your work aboard our ship? Surely it must be better than whatever primitive existence you had on your little world." All eyes turned to him. Crater stood very still, the tray steady in his hands. "I serve as needed, Captain," he said quietly. "You see." Silvara gestured to the crowd. "Simple. Grateful. This is what charity looks like, my friends. We take in the ugly, the backward, and we give them purpose. Even if that purpose is merely to carry our drinks." More laughter. Crater saw some faces that looked uncomfortable, but none spoke up. He set down the tray carefully and walked out of the ballroom. Behind him, the party continued as if he had never existed. In his quarters, Crater composed a message to his homeworld. His clawed fingers moved slowly across the communication pad. He described everything: the isolation, the insults, the way they treated him like a beast of burden. He explained that he had requested a transfer back home 3 times, and each request had been denied. It would reflect poorly on the Concordat's integration program, they had told him. He hit send and stared at the screen. On his world, honor was everything. Strength was not just physical but moral. To insult someone's dignity was the gravest offense. His people would not be pleased to hear how their son had been treated. The next day the ship entered the void reaches. Space seemed darker here, emptier. The navigation officer reported unusual readings, energy signatures that appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Captain Silvara dismissed the concerns. The eternal radiance was the pride of the Concordat fleet. Nothing could threaten it. Crater felt different. His instincts, honed by generations of predator ancestors, told him something was wrong. The ship was being watched. Hunted. He was in the lower engineering deck, performing maintenance on a coolant system that no one else wanted to touch, when the alarms began to scream. Red lights flooded the corridors. The ship shuddered violently, throwing Crater against a bulkhead. His keen ears picked up the sounds of explosions, hull breaches, and something else: the savage war cries of attackers boarding the ship. Over the intercom, panic filled the captain's voice. "All hands, battle stations. We are under attack by Ravager forces. This is not a drill." The Ravagers. Crater had heard stories about them. Pirates who had terrorized the galaxy for decades. Brutal, efficient killers who took no prisoners. They had never been defeated. Through the ship's internal cameras, Crater watched elegant Concordat officers running in confusion. They had never seen real combat. Their weapons training was ceremonial. Their tactics came from simulations and books. The Ravagers were cutting through them like paper. Crater looked down at his large hands. His claws extended slightly. For 6 months he had been told he was ugly, primitive, worthless. For 6 months he had accepted it. Now the ship needed something primitive. Now they would see what they had neglected. The sounds of screaming echoed through the ship's corridors. Crater moved through the lower engineering deck, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. Above him he could hear the chaos spreading. The Ravagers were tearing through the upper levels, and the Concordat crew had no answer for them. Through the comm system, he heard Captain Silvara's voice crack with fear. "All senior officers to escape pods. Repeat, senior officers evacuate immediately. This is a direct order." They were abandoning the ship. Abandoning the crew members who had served them faithfully. Crater reached the main engineering bay. The massive room housed the ship's power core, life support systems, and environmental controls. If the Ravagers took this room, everyone aboard would die. He could hear them coming closer, their heavy boots clanging on metal stairs, their guttural voices shouting in a language built for violence. The door exploded inward. 5 Ravagers poured through the opening, each one covered in dark armor plating and carrying weapons that hummed with deadly energy. They were large by Concordat standards, muscular and aggressive. They had conquered dozens of ships. They stopped when they saw Crater. For a moment there was silence. The Ravagers looked at the massive bear-like creature standing alone in the engineering bay. One of them laughed, a harsh sound. "What is this? Some kind of animal?" The leader growled. "Kill it and move on." They raised their weapons. Crater smiled. It was the first time he had smiled in 6 months. His lips pulled back, revealing teeth designed by evolution to tear and crush. "Finally," he rumbled, his deep voice filling the room. "A worthy challenge." He moved. The Concordat species had always seen Crater as slow and clumsy. They were wrong. The Urskai were predators, apex hunters who had dominated their world for millions of years. When a bear attacks, it does not lumber. It explodes into motion with terrifying speed. Crater crossed the distance before the Ravagers could fire. His massive paw swept out, catching the first attacker across the chest. The armor crumpled like thin foil. The Ravager flew backward, crashing through a control panel. The others opened fire. Energy bolts seared through the air. Crater was already moving, using the machinery as cover, his body flowing between obstacles with impossible grace. One bolt grazed his shoulder, burning through fur. He didn't slow down. He grabbed the second Ravager by the arm and simply pulled. The armor joint separated with a scream of metal and bone. Crater used the wounded attacker as a shield against the other's weapons, then threw the body into 2 more enemies. The leader backed away, fear finally showing in his eyes. "What are you?" he shouted. Crater didn't answer. He was done with words. Words had gotten him nothing but scorn. He leaped, his full weight crashing down on the leader. They tumbled across the floor, the Ravager's armor providing no protection against claws that had evolved to dig through solid rock. The fight lasted seconds. More Ravagers poured through the door. Crater roared, a sound that shook the walls, a sound that carried the fury of 6 months of humiliation and the pride of a warrior race that had been dismissed as primitive. He reached the environmental control panel and entered a series of commands with surprising precision. Those thick fingers that had been mocked as clumsy danced across the interface. The gravity in the corridor outside shifted. Ravagers stumbled and fell. Crater sealed the engineering bay and redirected the life support, flooding enemy-controlled sections with sleep gas. Through the ship's camera system, he watched the Ravagers falter. He had turned the eternal radiance itself into a weapon, using systems in ways the original engineers had never imagined. He redirected power flows, created magnetic fields that pulled weapons from hands, adjusted atmospheric pressure to disorient and weaken. In the central corridor, a dozen Ravagers gathered, trying to organize a final push toward engineering. Crater sealed himself in and waited at the door. When they breached through, he was ready. The corridor cameras went dark from the violence. Only the sounds remained, roars, screams, and the terrible sound of armor being torn apart by something that should not have been possible. When the lights came back on, Crater stood alone, breathing heavily, covered in burns and cuts that were already beginning to heal. Around him lay the proof that the Concordat had made a terrible mistake. They had neglected the bear. The bear had not neglected his duty. The emergency lights cast long shadows across the eternal radiance. The surviving crew members huddled in the main hall, their elegant forms trembling with shock. They had locked themselves inside while the battle raged, listening to sounds they could not explain. Now silence filled the ship, broken only by the hum of restored life support systems. The door opened. Crater walked in, his fur matted with blood and burns, his breathing heavy but steady. The crew pulled back instinctively, pressing against the far walls. They looked at him with new eyes, eyes filled not with disgust but with fear. "The ship is secure," Crater announced simply. "All Ravager forces eliminated. Engineering is operational. You are safe." No one spoke. No one moved to thank him. They simply stared. Captain Silvara had not made it to an escape pod. She stood near the back of the group, her silver skin no longer singing but silent with shame. She had ordered the senior officers to flee while leaving the rest to die. Crater had saved them all. 3 hours later, a Concordat battle group arrived, responding to the distress signal. Admiral Theron, a Luxari commander whose crystal body reflected light like a prism, boarded the ship expecting to find wreckage and bodies. Instead, he found a functioning vessel and a crew that looked haunted. "Report," he demanded, standing on the bridge. The captain's voice was weak. "We were attacked by Ravagers. Our security forces were overwhelmed. We prepared to evacuate." "Then how is your ship still intact?" How did you survive? Silence. Finally, a junior officer spoke up, a young Vale-born named Tessara who had once refused to sit near Crater in the cafeteria. It was the Erskine. Crater. He fought them alone. He saved us all. The Admiral's crystalline face showed disbelief. One crew member defeated an entire Ravager boarding party? Impossible. Show me the security recordings. They gathered in the security center. The Admiral watched the footage in silence. The screens showed Crater moving through the ship like a force of nature. They showed him protecting crew members who had mocked him, dragging wounded officers to safety even while under fire. They showed strategy and precision that military tacticians would study for years. When the footage ended, Admiral Theron stood motionless for a long moment. Send me everything you have on the Erskine species, he ordered quietly. Immediately. The reports came flooding in from Concordat intelligence. Information that should have been reviewed before first contact. The Erskine were not primitive. They were ancient. Their civilization had existed for thousands of years before the Concordat had even formed. They had developed philosophy, engineering, and martial arts to levels that rivaled any galactic power. They had simply chosen to remain isolated, finding the politics of the galaxy shallow and meaningless. They valued honor, duty, and personal strength above beauty and elegance. When the Concordat had landed on their world, the Erskine had sent Crater as an observer, to learn about these strange beings who measured worth by appearance. The reports detailed Erskine physiology. Their bone density was 3 times standard. Their muscle fibers were designed for explosive power. Their reflexes operated at speeds that seemed impossible. They were not slow or clumsy. They were efficient, every movement calculated for maximum effect with minimum waste. The Concordat had judged an entire species by how they looked. Admiral Theron returned to the bridge. He found Crater in the engineering bay, quietly repairing damage from the battle. Crew member Crater, the Admiral began, then stopped. That title seemed inadequate now. I have come to offer an apology on behalf of the Concordat. We failed to see your worth. We treated you shamefully. Crater continued working, his large hands carefully reconnecting severed power lines. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm. You neglected the bear. The bear did not neglect his duty. That is all that matters. The story spread like wildfire across the galactic networks. Within days, every species knew about the Erskine who had single-handedly defeated the Ravagers. Trading posts discussed it. Military academies analyzed it. News broadcasts replayed the security footage again and again. Other species began asking uncomfortable questions. How many others had the Concordat dismissed based on appearance? How much strength had they overlooked because it did not fit their narrow definition of civilization? On distant worlds, species that had been rejected for membership in the Concordat watched the footage and felt hope. Perhaps worth was not measured in beauty. Perhaps strength came in forms the elegant species had never imagined. The legend of Crater had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. 2 weeks after the attack, the Ravager Armada arrived. 300 warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Concordat territory, their hulls scarred from 1,000 battles. They had come for revenge. No one had ever humiliated the Ravagers and lived to speak of it. Their leader, a massive warlord named Vex the Destroyer, sent a message that broadcasted across every Concordat channel. His face filled screens throughout the galaxy, twisted with rage. You have killed my warriors. You have made fools of the Ravager clans. There is only one payment for this insult. Give us the beast who did this. Give us Crater the Erskine. Deliver him to us within 1 cycle, or we will burn every Concordat world to ash. The Concordat High Council convened in emergency session. Hundreds of representatives from elegant species gathered in the Great Chamber, their voices rising in panic and argument. The Ravagers had never been defeated in open warfare. 300 warships would devastate the Concordat fleet. We must comply with their demands, one council member argued. 1 life for billions. It is logical. He saved our crew, another protested weakly. It would be dishonorable. Honor does not matter when our worlds burn. The debate raged for hours. Finally they reached a decision. They would offer Crater to the Ravagers. It was the practical choice. The necessary choice. Admiral Theron was given the task of informing Crater. He found the Erskine in his small quarters, preparing his few belongings. You have heard, the Admiral said quietly. Yes, Crater replied. I will go to them. I will not let innocent lives be lost because of me. There must be another way. Crater shook his massive head. There is not. I knew this would happen when I chose to fight. The Concordat's elegant warriors cannot stand against the Ravagers. I will face them alone. He walked to the shuttle bay where a small ship had been prepared. The crew he had saved lined the corridors watching him pass. Some looked ashamed. Others wept quietly. Tessara, the young Veilborn, stepped forward. "This is wrong," she whispered. "You saved us. We should save you." Crater placed a gentle paw on her shoulder. "You cannot. But perhaps you will remember that strength comes in many forms. That is enough." He boarded the shuttle and set course for the Ravager fleet. Behind him, the Concordat prepared for the inevitable war that would follow his sacrifice. But Crater's message home had reached the Earth-sky 2 weeks ago. As his shuttle approached the Ravager armada, space itself seemed to tear open. A fleet emerged from hyperspace, ships that looked crude and utilitarian compared to the Concordat's elegant vessels. But there were thousands of them and they moved with predatory precision. The Earth-sky had come. The lead ship opened a communication channel. The voice that spoke was deep and resonant, like Crater's but older, weathered by time and wisdom. "I am Theron Ironpaw, elder of the Earth-sky clans. You called our brother ugly. You used him as a servant. You abandoned him to die. He still chose honor. He still protected those who scorned him." The elder's voice grew harder. "We have watched your Concordat from afar, finding your obsession with beauty shallow and meaningless. We wanted no part of your politics. But you have shown us something important. You have shown us that the galaxy needs protectors, not just politicians." The Earth-sky fleet moved forward, positioning themselves between the Ravagers and Concordat space. "We are done watching. We are done being dismissed. Come then, Ravagers. Face those you think are beasts. Learn what bears can do when they stop holding back." The battle that followed became legend. The Earth-sky did not just fight, they dominated. Each ship carried warriors trained from birth in combat, strategy, and honor. They moved like Crater had moved, with efficiency and devastating power. The Ravagers, who had terrorized the galaxy for generations, discovered what true predators looked like. Crater joined the battle, his small shuttle docking with the Earth-sky flagship. His people welcomed him with roars of pride. Together they coordinated both fleets, Earth-sky and Concordat forces fighting side by side for the first time. The Ravager armada broke. Ships fled into hyperspace, their legend of invincibility shattered.